Pam Bondi didn't expect Jasmine Crockett to turn her own words into a national reckoning. What started as a Fox News segment spiraled into one of the most viral political confrontations of the year, a moment that exposed how power, accountability, and ego collide when the cameras start rolling. Within seconds of Bondi's comments, Crockett fired back with the kind of poise and fury that only someone tired of being threatened could deliver. And the way she did it, it left viewers stunned. Pam Bondi, the country's former top law enforcement official, went on television and took aim at a sitting member of Congress. For millions watching, it looked like more than criticism. It felt like intimidation.
Is true or not, or whatever the case is, or who should be sued, who shouldn't be sued. All I know is that a great American hero, a good senator out of New Jersey, said something to the effect yesterday as he was shattering the record for holding the floor, a record that had been held by another racist in this country. As he shattered that, he said something about the fact that this should not be about left versus right. It should be about right versus wrong. And I am going to tell you that I want us to focus on right versus wrong. The reason that we are struggling right now in this country as it relates to people not trusting agencies, honestly, a lot of it is because of elected leaders. Let me tell you, one of the things that the chairman and I actually agree upon, we don't agree on a lot, is that we both know that there has been a sharp incline as it relates to threats upon our lives. Regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, we both know and agree that as sitting members of Congress, we both are enduring more death threats than anybody should in this country. And I believe that it is because of the divisive rhetoric, and it is because of the selective enforcement of things. And so when we have, and I'm gonna be clear, because I had remarks and I'm going a whole other way. To have the sitting attorney general go on, and I'm gonna call it faux news. I know some of y'all love it, but it's fake to me. To have her go on Fox News and to then decide that she wanted to send a threat to me, it was wrong. Because here it is, she is the highest law enforcement agent in this country, and people are watching and they are consuming this information and they are believing that simply because I decided that I wanted to exercise my right to free speech, which I am not abridged from doing, that she then wanted to then politicize something that should not be politicized. I don't like Elon Musk. I'm gonna say it 50,000 times. I don't like him. I don't like that he going out there and he firing people. I think that he's a crook because somehow the rest of us can't sit around and get whatever federal contracts we want. The rest of us can't sit around and get law enforcement and get them somehow ordained as federal law enforcement to protect him. The rest of us can't get our dealerships protected by the federal government. That is somebody that is operating above the law. For whatever reason, just because he has a lot of money, more money than everybody else. And yes, I am happy to see that on my birthday, which is what I said, there were peaceful protests around this world against him because he is a problem. And so you never should have somebody that is sitting that high and is going to sit up here and threaten a sitting member of Congress when she knew good and well, if she watched the entire thing, that I specifically told protesters to make sure you consult with lawyers, just like I've told protesters over and over and over in the history of me advising people to go out and exercise their constitutional right. The fact that there are other sitting members that have received letters of threat from this new DOJ tells me that they are about retribution and they are not about following the law. The reason that our party, or I won't even say our party, our country is torn apart is because we can't even agree on right versus wrong. This should not be left versus right. The only thing that we're asking is that we have law enforcement that will show up when there is an actual crime. If somebody calls and says, hey, I need you to investigate this cyber crime, or I need you to investigate this child pornography, or I need you to investigate this robbery, then we want somebody to show up, and we don't want them to look at us and act as if just because I'm black or because I'm woman, that I am not worthy of having that case investigated, because we have an administration that is continuously railing against diversity, equity, and inclusion, or we don't need people that show up that feel like diversity should not be valued. That is why we should have somebody that may show up and looks like me. The final thing that I'll say, because you've been gracious, is this. When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black. Charlie looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, let me tell you something. When I walk in, I'm going to walk in with a level of rapport and understanding that maybe some of my other colleagues will not. Charlie offered me my job, and I worked my butt off, and I worked really, really hard for all of my clients, not just those that look like me, and that is what it looks like to serve. Thank you.
But Crockett wasn't about to let that slide. Her message was crystal clear. You don't threaten democracy's watchdogs and expect silence. What followed wasn't just a defense. It was a masterclass in how to hold power accountable in real time. Crockett's reaction hit different because it wasn't rehearsed. There was no teleprompter, no PR polish, just raw honesty. She looked straight into the camera and reminded everyone that threats against lawmakers aren't politics. They're personal. Every elected official, regardless of party, now lives under a growing shadow of hostility. She made it impossible to ignore. The attacks, the threats, the selective outrage. It all stems from leaders who choose division over decency. And when someone with Bondi's authority feeds that fire, people listen and people act. But that wasn't the whole story, Crockett said, pivoting from defense to indictment. She called out the double standard head-on, the way law enforcement seems to flex its power selectively, punishing some and protecting others. It wasn't just about her. It was about every American who's ever watched powerful figures bend the law while ordinary people face the consequences. Crockett turned what looked like a personal feud into a public warning. When justice becomes political, no one is safe. Then she dropped a name that made headlines: Elon Musk. She accused him of operating above the law, saying out loud what many whisper online: that money and influence now buy a different kind of justice. She pointed to federal contracts, special protections, and the quiet privilege that shields billionaires from accountability. The crowd listening could feel it. This wasn't random shade. This was her way of connecting the dots between unchecked power and selective enforcement. The rest of us, she said, can't get our dealerships or our homes protected by federal agents. We don't have that kind of power. We don't have that kind of money. It was the kind of statement that cuts across party lines because it feels true. Her words hit harder because they came from someone who's been on both sides of the system. Crockett shared how she started her career as a public defender. No experience, just determination. Hire me, she told her boss, because I'm black. It shocked him, but she explained. Her background gave her a kind of understanding that couldn't be learned in a classroom. She knew what it meant to walk into a courtroom where the odds were already stacked. That story wasn't about race alone. It was about empathy, representation, and why government needs voices that reflect real people's experiences. It was personal, powerful, and disarmingly human. From that story, she drew a larger truth. Diversity isn't a buzzword. It's what keeps justice fair. When people in power look like only one part of the population, they start protecting that part more than the rest. She argued that inclusion in law enforcement, courts, and Congress isn't about appearances, it's about trust. People are more likely to believe in justice when they can see themselves in it. And that's what makes Bondi's threat so dangerous. It wasn't just one person's words. It symbolized a system willing to punish difference. Crockett's speech shifted from defense to offense with precision. She called out how officials inside the Department of Justice had allegedly sent letters of intimidation to other lawmakers. That tells me they're about retribution, she said, not the rule of law. It was a chilling claim, framed carefully, not an accusation of a specific crime, but a question about motive. Were those threats political payback? Were they warnings to stay quiet? Either way, the implication was clear. Authority is being used as a weapon, and the people meant to keep us safe are starting to play favorites. Every section of her response built momentum. She dismantled the myth that power equals integrity. She made the audience think about how easily the line between justice and politics can blur, and how quickly a threat from someone in power can silence truth. Her calm tone made it even more powerful. No shouting, no theatrics, just conviction. That's why the clip exploded across social media. It wasn't outrage for clicks. It was courage on camera. As the speech unfolded, she turned to the audience, almost like a teacher, breaking down civics in real time. She reminded everyone that democracy depends on checks and balances, that no branch of government is supposed to intimidate another. When a former attorney general publicly threatens a sitting lawmaker, it doesn't just cross a line, it erases it. Congress makes the laws, she explained. The executive enforces them. The judiciary interprets them. And when one branch starts bullying another, the whole structure cracks. That one line transformed a political argument into a civics lesson millions needed to hear. Her point about accountability hit even harder because she connected it to everyday people. All we're asking, she said, is that law enforcement shows up when there's an actual crime. She listed examples: cybercrimes, child exploitation, robberies, the real issues ordinary Americans deal with. Her frustration was obvious. Too much focus on political theater, not enough on public safety. She painted a picture of a justice system distracted by headlines, ignoring the basics it was created to protect. It was less of a rant and more of a reality check. And then she addressed the issue no one wanted to say out loud: discrimination. We don't want someone showing up to our case thinking we're less worthy because we're black or because we're women. It was one of those moments that froze the room. She wasn't asking for special treatment. She was demanding equal treatment, equal attention, equal respect. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for everyone who's ever felt invisible in a system built to serve them. The story of her early days as a lawyer tied everything together. She'd once been underestimated, told she lacked experience, and still earned her spot through grit and empathy. That journey mirrored her message. Power should come from service, not status. Real leadership, she said, means showing up for everyone, not just those who look like you, vote like you, or can afford your legal defense. That authenticity gave her words moral weight. You could feel that she believed every syllable. By the time she finished, what began as a response to a threat had transformed into something much bigger: a manifesto on justice, equality, and integrity. She exposed how easily power can twist law into a weapon, but also reminded people that it doesn't have to stay that way. The reason our country is torn apart, she said, is because we can't even agree on right versus wrong. That single sentence summed up the exhaustion so many feel. The idea that truth itself has become partisan. Her closing words were deliberate and unflinching. We need law enforcement that shows up when there's a real crime, not when someone powerful gets embarrassed. She called out the hypocrisy of an administration that rails against diversity while benefiting from it politically. And then, without raising her voice, she gave the kind of statement that lingers long after the video ends. Leadership means protecting people, not punishing them for speaking truth. The applause that followed wasn't partisan. It was human. Crockett's response resonated because it wasn't about revenge. It was about principle. She reminded everyone watching that being in power doesn't make you right, and being criticized doesn't make you a victim. What matters is accountability, not to a party, but to the people. And that's what Pam Bondi underestimated. Crockett didn't just defend herself. She defended the foundation of democratic government. As the clip continued to circulate, commentators across the spectrum took notice. Some called it a takedown. Others called it one of the most honest speeches of the year. But beyond the politics, it was something rare, a reminder that courage can still cut through noise. In an age where so many leaders hide behind talking points, one woman stood up and said what needed to be said, knowing the backlash that would follow. That's what made it powerful. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't deny the moment's impact. It sparked debates on news shows, social media, and inside Congress itself. Some demanded Bondi apologize. Others defended her comments. But in the end, the narrative shifted. What started as an attack became an awakening. Proof that when someone in power crosses a line, people are still willing to call it out, and millions are willing to listen. And that's the real story here. Not just a feud between two public figures, but a reflection of a country deciding what kind of leadership it wants. One that rules through fear, or one that leads through integrity. Crockett's stand made people pick a side. It asked viewers, quietly but unmistakably, when it's your turn to choose between silence and truth, what will you do? Because at the end of the day, this isn't about politics. It's about principle, about whether justice is still blind or whether it's just pretending to be. And in that viral moment, Pam Bondi's threat and Jasmine Crockett's response became a mirror for America, one that forces every viewer to ask who really holds power and who's brave enough to hold it accountable. If you believe no one, not billionaires, not politicians, not former attorneys general, should ever be above the law, make your voice heard. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. Because democracy only works when people stay informed, stay loud, and stand up for what's right.